Hello. So what I'd like to do today is to go ahead and cover what I think is an often overlooked variant when it comes to N64 game collecting, and those are the Brazilian variant cartridges. So what happened is that there were 135 titles that had a variant specifically for the Brazilian market when they were originally released. And what's ended up happening is that basically all those cartridges have stayed exclusively in that market down there. And, it, like the American market, some are more common than others. But basically, once you leave Brazil, finding one is the equivalent of a needle in a haystack. They are not easy to find anywhere else in the world. You might go on eBay. You might find a handful of them if you do a search for like N64 Brazilian or something like that. You'll find a handful of them, but that's really about it. You're not going to find any decent selection of them. And yes, they are going to be expensive because they're basically being imported from Brazil. So realistically, unless you've got somebody who's like, friends, family, you travel for business, or you pay somebody to import them for you from Brazil, then you're pretty much out of luck with finding any of these cartridges anywhere outside of Brazil. So anyway, I actually went ahead and imported one from Brazil, and I'm going to go ahead and cover why I chose this particular title for several reasons. And just kind of cover, the differences and similarities. So a general thing to know about Brazilian cartridges, because a lot of people might be sitting there is like, well, what about, language barriers? Is it compatible with a standard US NTSC console? The answer to that is you have nothing to worry about. It's actually the US game board that is in there, and they were never released. The N64 never released any games in Portuguese. So you have the US game board in there. It's the NTSC, English-based. So if you buy any of these titles, you are not going to have any language barrier issues or any hardware compatibility issues. They plug straight into a standard console that's unmodified, and they will play just fine with no issues. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and share my first Brazilian variant cartridge, and the one that I chose was actually Beetle Adventure Racing. Okay. Now, the first thing you may notice about this guy, as far as the difference is that if you take a look at it, the title's in Portuguese on there, and that's actually part of the reason that I chose this game, because believe it or not, the majority of Brazilian cartridges do not have their titles in Portuguese. They're in English. And this happened to be one of fewer than 10 titles that actually had the entire title in Portuguese. So anyways, that was the biggest reason that I chose it. If you look here, it also has, you've got the Nintendo logo on there, which you normally don't see on the US version of this one, as well as the Brazilian rating system there. So anyways, but this is what it looks like. And so really, the only difference between this and the standard US version of Beetle Adventure Racing is the front and back label. The back label is a bit faded, but it is in Portuguese. But as I said, really, that's it. The front and back label in Portuguese. Beyond that, it's literally the exact same game. So you're not going to have any compatibility issues with being able to play this. Now, I chose Beetle Adventure Racing for another reason. Another reason that I chose it was because even in Brazil, when I looked on Mercado Libre, which is the Brazilian equivalent and basically South American equivalent, because they have one for each of the countries that are south of the border, they only had at the time 4 listings for this game, for the Brazilian version. But the funny thing is they actually had 11 listings for the US version. So believe it or not, even in Brazil, when it came to, at least Mercado Libre, there were actually more US version cartridges than there were the Brazilian variant cartridges. And when I looked recently, it's actually been narrowed down to only one other listing that I can find for availability of the Brazilian variant cartridges. You will not find a single listing, and there hasn't been for months, on eBay. You won't find one on Mercari, of course. You won't find one on Facebook Marketplace. You won't find any on OfferUp. So the point is that, when it comes to availability, the Brazilian variant of Beetle Adventure Racing is definitely not one that's easy to find for anybody outside of Brazil. And I would say it's actually pretty rare. So as far as that's concerned, that was a big part of it. And it was actually, even for Brazilian standards, kind of on the expensive side. If I had bought this guy down in Brazil, it would have run me about $65 to $70 for the loose cart by the time I factored in shipping and all that. Admittedly, I paid a broker, so I'm going to go ahead, full disclosure, $125 was what it cost me in order to get this thing ordered off of Mercado Libre by a broker, basically, who has a listing on eBay. And so I ordered it through him because that way you get the protection for eBay, and he does back up and have hassle-free returns on all of his stuff. So anyway, so that's the other part of this that I'll cover, is that, if you're interested in that, I can give you the information for the guy who will do the brokering for you, because you can't buy directly from Mercado Libre on if you live outside of the country that it's the site's specifically geared for. It's virtually impossible. So so the only way to do it is to literally, pay a broker to go and do it for you. So yeah, as I said, it was $125. So yeah, it was expensive, but in terms of availability, I can find more copies available of Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut than I can find this guy. So, I put that into consideration when I bought it. But, the other reason that I chose Beetle Adventure Racing is, quite honestly, it's a fun racing game. So, even my kids who, their interest is kind of lukewarm in racing games, but they were having a blast playing it the other day, finding shortcuts, hitting cars at high speed and watching them blow up and that sort of thing. So, anyways, it was just... It's just kind of a fun game, so, if I decide to pull it out and play it from time to time, I've got something that's playable. So, anyway, but as I said, it really just depends, and you'll have to kind of do the math and determine whether or not it's appropriate for you, and to decide if this is something that you want to do. As I said, for me, it's just like, when my choices are, when I'm looking at $125 to get a unique variant of, a fun game that I enjoy, or I'm looking at spending, $700 to $900 on a wall trophy that, quite frankly, every other time I turn around on a Nintendo fan group, you can find somebody who's, thumping their chest about just scoring a copy of Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut. It's kind of one of those things where it's just like, okay, which one's really more unique? I couldn't tell you for sure, because I don't know exactly the kind of sales numbers that these had down in Brazil for this variant. All I can tell you is at this point, if you live outside of Brazil, you're going to have a really hard time tracking one of these down. So anyways, as I said, it's just something that, I think is often overlooked, and it's just kind of something, a different option that you can look at. I am going to tell you this: if you do decide to do Brazilian cartridges, I would definitely look at a bulk order. I would probably pay less for this guy had I managed to, coordinate multiple items from the broker and everything. I could have gotten it cheaper, because of, bulk discounts on shipping and that sort of thing. So if you do decide to do it, and you do have to, get a broker to do it for you, I would definitely look at trying to get, like 3 or 4 more titles at a time, just because when you look at the price per cartridge, it's going to be a lot more reasonable. And anyways, that's all I've got, and thanks for watching.